Growing up, I'm a little brother, and my older brother is 5.5 years older than me. And so there was lots of competition that went on in my house. Lots of football competition, and I lost 98% of those. The other 2% was just by chance or luck, because my brother tripped or something, right? But from an early age, there was a switch that got flipped in me for hyper competitiveness. Like, that's just me. And that's how God created me. And so I'm hyper competitive. And I get to college and I'm still hyper competitive. And it was one of those things that like kind of had gotten in the way of some things in life. Because I'm just like, I don't like to lose. I still really don't like to lose, but I want to just share with you a testimony. I was a sophomore in college, and my roommate, who's been my best friend since 8th grade, still is to this day, called me and said, or he came in the room and I was doing something. He's like, hey, let's go play racquetball. I was like, okay, let's go. In my mind, we're going to play racquetball so I can just sweep the court with him. And we get in there and we're playing, and man, we're going at it, and we're back and forth. And he ended up beating me. And I got furious. Like, I'm telling you, I don't even remember getting my racket out of the gym. I just walked out. And he's like, Brady. I'm like, no, we're not doing this. And I just walked out. I think I went to the dorm. I got my keys, got in my truck, and I drove. And he's like, what is going on? Like, what, it was a racquetball game. But I remember driving in my little Ford Ranger single cab truck, driving down the road, and I just remember the Lord just really gently reminding me and telling me that my competitive spirit is not meant to get into the way of my relationships. And as I drove in that moment, I said, Lord, would you just take it from me? Just take it. And in that moment, I felt this release. Played tons of more racquetball games and never got upset again. Just continued. And it was really the first moment of my life that God had just really taken something instantly. I contrast that with all of my life, the Lord has continued, as I have prayed and prayed, to give me patience, that I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it. He's still working that in me. And he's using it. And I continue to struggle, and he continues just to be gracious and kind. And I tell you both of those things because change can happen instantly and over time. as we walk with the Lord, and he makes us look more like him. And so in our continued series of leading our neighbors to know and be changed by Jesus, I want you to see what happens in this guy named Saul in Acts chapter 9. Acts chapter 9. And I'm just going to read a couple of verses first, and then we're going to jump to verse 20. It says at the beginning of chapter 9, "But Saul, still breathing threats and murder against disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem." So the picture is painted for us. We have this guy named Saul, and Saul was he's the guy who is probably the cream of the cream of the cream of the crop, if you will, okay? Studied under Gamaliel, who was considered the greatest rabbi of the time, and chosen by Gamaliel. Super smart. He's both Roman citizen and Jew, and he is hyper zealous, okay? And so he goes to the high priest, and he says, "Hey, can you give me the word so that if I go into synagogues, and I can go to Damascus, and I can find people in the synagogues that belong to the way." That was the early adoption of saying these are the people who believe in Jesus, who call themselves Christians, is the way, okay? If you're a Mandalorian fan, stop. Just playing. But literally, they belong to the way. And so Saul's number one goal in life was to eradicate all those who profess Jesus as the Messiah. That's his goal in life, okay? That's his goal in life, is to eradicate the world of those who belong to the way. And let me tell you something. If Jesus can change Saul, there is no one outside of the grace of God. His goal in life was to eradicate those who believed in Jesus. And God said, "Watch this." So Saul has this encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus. And Jesus asked Saul, "Saul, why are you persecuting me?" in verse 4. And he said, "Who are you, Lord?" And he said, "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. But rise and enter the city, and you will be told what you are to do." So he has this radical encounter with Jesus. Jesus appears to him on the road to Damascus. He sees Jesus. Jesus asks him, he's like, "Why are you persecuting me?" He's like, "Who are you?" He says, "I am Jesus." And in that moment, Saul encounters Jesus, and things change radically. Okay? They change radically. Listen, we're going to throw a picture up here. You probably have seen the picture before. Maybe I emailed it. We're trying. This was my fault. Okay, you've seen this picture before, right? How many of you, yes, you've seen this picture? Okay, for those of you who haven't, all these people in orange are Coptic Christians, okay? They're all Coptic Christians. They've been captured by ISIS, who is all in the black, and they are all beheaded, ultimately, for not renouncing the name of Jesus, okay? So listen, this is the incredible thing. This is what I want you to see about what the gospel does, what an encounter with Jesus does. Paul is the guy holding the knife. You understand that? That's Paul, the guy in the camo. He's the leader. He's the guy holding the knife. He encounters Jesus, and now Paul becomes what? The guy's kneeled down. That's the change that's found in Jesus. Now, watch this. The end of verse 19, beginning of verse 20. For some days he was with the disciples at Damascus. Verse 20. And immediately he proclaimed Jesus in the synagogues, saying, He is the Son of God. Encounter with Jesus changes our message. You understand that? An encounter with Jesus changes our message. What was Saul's whole point? What was this? We just said it. To eradicate the people who were proclaiming Jesus as the Messiah, as the Son of God. He encounters Jesus and listen, it's there. And I think this is so fascinating what Luke does, is that he tells us in the beginning of chapter 9 what? That Saul literally goes and says, hey, I need your word, your approval to go into the synagogues and gather up those that belong to the way to bring them bound to Jerusalem. And he has an encounter with Jesus. Watch what happens. And immediately he proclaimed Jesus where? In the synagogues. In the synagogues, saying he is the Son of God. Saul goes from this guy that's saying, hey, I'm going to go in the synagogues, I'm going to round them all up, I'm going to bound them, and I'm going to bring them back to Jerusalem so that we can take care of this. He comes in to this encounter with Jesus. He sees Jesus for who he is. And now he's in the synagogues declaring, nope. He is the Son of God. He is who he said he is. He is God alone. Listen, when you and I come into a relationship with Jesus, when we have an encounter with him and we choose this day, I'm going to follow him, it changes our message. Because the reality is, for most of us, we're walking around with some type of message, aren't we? We are. We say things, we talk about things that we're passionate about, don't we? How many of you love hunting? Okay, 7 of you. How many of you love fishing? Okay, a few more of you. You're my kind of people, okay? Listen. How many of you have ever told hunting or fishing stories? Yeah, right? Passionately. You're not going to believe this, right? The fish you caught all of a sudden became the biggest the lake had ever seen. How many of you love sports? How many of you have ever told a sports story of you did or your kid did? Yeah, we all have, right? How many of you love music? How many of you have ever told a story revolving around music? Yeah. What do? We talk in stories. Did y'all know that? We talk in stories. Jimmy Kate knows it. We talk in stories, don't we? Right? We all do. We're all just prone to it. We talk in stories. And oftentimes we talk about what we love, what we're passionate about. And oftentimes what we talk the most about is what we're most passionate about. Whether it be your kids or your grandkids. What is it that you talk about? Because that tends to be what you're most passionate about. And then over time, that becomes the message that you want those around you to know, isn't it? But listen, as believers, as those who have come to know Jesus, an encounter with him changes our message. Because now, the thing that I'm most passionate about should always be Jesus. The thing at the forefront of every conversation I have should be Jesus. Right? So listen, you don't know how to share your faith? We're going to teach you today. Listen, there's 3 stories. There's your story, there's the other person's story, and there's God's story. Right? And we share our faith in those ways. We talk in stories. Let's talk about Jesus. For every sports story you share Jesus 3 times. For every hunting story you share Jesus 3 times. For every music story you tell about Taylor Swift, share about Jesus 3 times. Whatever it is that you tend to talk about, identify it and go, for every time I share about that, I'm going to share about Jesus 3 times. Because an encounter with Him, church, changes our message. It changes what we communicate to the world. Saul went from, I'm going to eradicate this world of believers, to now going, no, it's all about Him and Him alone. It changed his message. Watch what happens in verse 21. And all who heard him were amazed and said, is not this the man who made havoc in Jerusalem of those who called upon this name? And has he not come here for this purpose, to bring them bound before the chief priests? What is Saul's influence at this point? It's a legitimate question by the people, isn't it? Isn't this the guy who's like, whose goal in life is to eradicate all those who call on this name? Isn't this the guy who came from Jerusalem to take people back to Jerusalem bound? Isn't this guy? That's his influence. Everybody knew it. But I want you to know this, that encountering Jesus changes our influence. It changes now the influence that we have on others. Doesn't it? Because in the same way that we all have a message, we all have influence. Yeah, Brady, I'm not an influencer. Don't put me in that category. Fair enough. However, you do have influence on those directly around you. Whether it be a parent, whether it be a sibling, whether you're a grandparent, whatever you are, you have an influence on those directly around you. And an encounter with Jesus changes that influence entirely. Doesn't it? It's been so fun over the last 4 years to see some grandpas get in that baptistry and baptize their grandkids because they led them to the Lord. That's influence, right? It's influence. You have a role. And as a believer in Jesus, that should take precedence over everything else in terms of influencing your kids, your grandkids, your siblings, your coworkers, your neighbors, your friends, everything. They should know the thing about you the most is that you are a Jesus follower. Man, if some of you started talking more about Jesus than you do about fantasy football, there would be a shift. They would go, what is going on? Like you used to talk about this, but now you're talking about, they're asking questions, aren't they? Saul goes from persecuting them to going, hey, I'm proclaiming the name of Jesus, and they're sitting back going, what? They're a little bit amazed, a little bit bewildered. But listen, an encounter with Jesus changes our influence. And then the final thing is this, watch in verse 22. But Saul increased all the more in strength and confounded the Jews who lived in Damascus by proving that Jesus was the Christ. So the last thing is this, is that encountering Jesus changes our courage. Changes our courage. Saul goes to Damascus to take the Christians, and now he's sitting in the synagogues, and it says that he increased more in strength, and then he confounded the Jews. He confused them who lived in Damascus by doing what? Proving that Jesus was the Christ. All of the knowledge, all of everything that he had learned and grown and knew in the Old Testament. Paul would have had the entire first 5 books of the Old Testament memorized by heart. Okay? And everything that he knew about the Torah, everything he knew about the Old Testament is now coming into play. Because what is he doing? Paul's now taking everything that God has already done in him and already used and saying, hey, this is him. Here's how I know. I know because I know this word, therefore I can show you that he is the fulfillment of all the things that we've heard, all the things that we've been taught, all the things that we've read. He is the fulfillment of all of that. And now all of a sudden, Saul is not courageous and zealous to eradicate people. Saul is courageous and zealous to let everyone know that Jesus is the Messiah. All because he had an encounter with Jesus. And it changed everything. Listen, if you're here this morning and you are a believer and you've put your faith and your trust in Jesus, are you continually letting him change you? Change your heart, change your actions, change everything about who you are. Change the message that you're sending out, change the influence in your life, giving you courage that you didn't know you had. Is he changing you? And if you're here this morning and you say, hey, I've never come to a point where I've decided to follow Jesus. And I'm still not even really sure that this is the way I want to go. Can I tell you from Saul's testimony this morning? From my own testimony. That God can change anyone at any time. And he's ready to do that for you today. I couldn't help but think when we were singing just now of Saul in heaven, who later becomes Paul, in heaven with all that he is, singing, the righteous for the rebel stood condemned. The righteous for the rebel stood condemned. And him with all that he is saying, that was me. That was me. I was the rebel, stood condemned, and you stepped in my place. And that changed everything.